So hi Neth, it's really great that you can join us today before going to Sharm El-Sheikh for COP27, and that you've got some time to share with us your thoughts about what's happening in Egypt and what your expectations are.
Thank you, Ronnie, for this conversation. The main concern of etc. group coming to Egypt at COP27 is actually the geoengineering technologies are starting to rear their ugly heads out in the open in the agenda of the COP27. And which actually took us by surprise in a way, because we are not expecting it to be this fast, and also coming from an unexpected entry point. But looking back, we shouldn't have been surprised. The supervisory body of the Article 6.4 mechanism, which is about the market mechanism under this cooperative approaches for voluntary cooperation, under the Paris Agreement, has actually come up with recommendations from their third meeting last weekend, which actually puts forward to the CMA, the parties of the Paris Agreement, to discuss the modalities, also guidelines for the carbon trading, and also referred to land-based and engineering-based technologies for removal activities. That's how they call it. It's not actually mentioned in the third meeting, not mentioned in the recommendation that will be forwarded to the CMA, but it was discussed explicitly in the first and second meeting in July and also in September, that geoengineering technologies, it was not mentioned as geoengineering technologies, but as removal activities that include the direct air capture, or DAC, also ocean fertilization, ocean alkalinization, BECS are included in those technologies that they mentioned as could be qualified for as activities for removals that would have to be certified under the market mechanism, which means that the removals coming from these technologies can be traded in the carbon market, and worse, can actually be used for offsets. In the guidelines and protocols that were forwarded by the supervisory body to the CMA, it actually explicitly said that these activities can be done in one country. So these land-based and engineering-based activities for removals can be done in one country, where it is expected that the country that hosts these activities will have to implement their own measures for environmental, social, and also biodiversity protection. So it actually leaves that responsibility on the country, which means you'll have to rely. If there are laws around geoengineering, you're lucky, because there are actually very few countries that have laws that regulate geoengineering. Also, it says that it can be included as an offset. So, which means one company or one country can use the greenhouse gases removed from those land-based or engineering-based technologies as can be traded or can be used for offsets. That includes ocean fertilization, which means it actually is considering ocean as a sink, which is huge. And using ocean fertilization as an activity is largely problematic because there's been tons of studies, scientific studies, that show that ocean fertilization is not going to help at all in mitigating greenhouse gas emission. It will actually result to biodiversity losses and also disruption of marine ecosystems, not to mention potential impacts on coastal and marine communities. So these are really creating a lot of reactions from civil society who are in Sharm right now. And from what I understand in the schedule, the first informal consultation around the recommendations of the supervisory body on Article 6.4 mechanism will be meeting this afternoon in Sharm. So we will see how countries will react to that, how negotiators will use that recommendation in order to advance other things in other streams of the negotiations, which always happens in the COP. I have to say that we were actually surprised at the swiftness of how geoengineering technologies, in particular removals, carbon dioxide removal technologies, have been brought into the UNFCCC, particularly in COP-27. And those colleagues in CSOs who have followed the third meeting of the supervisory body last weekend were actually saying that they were really kept out in the dark. Like they were not even allowed into the room, but were just observing in a separate room. And we're surprised that after session, an overnight session, that this recommendation has came out. Also, there are some very problematic aspects of that recommendation in terms of definition of removals, which actually pertains to the result of the removal activity rather than the outcome of the removal activities. Our main concern, as I have to go back to your question, is following the negotiations on Article 6.4 and also keeping an eye on different processes that where geoengineering could also come up, maybe not as swift, but who knows? There are processes such as the discussion on response measures, also the discussions on the global stocktake, as well as the discussion on the second periodic review, where inputs from scientific experts' discussions have already mentioned or made reference to carbon dioxide removal in particular and CCS in previous discussions. So yeah, we're there to watch out, and we're actually glad that there's actually a big group of civil society and social movements who are also following these processes at the COP.
Okay, so it seems like the negotiations around geoengineering technologies are moving really rapidly. And you're traveling to Sharm El-Sheikh in a few days, I think. And it would be really interesting to know a bit more about what you would count as a success from Sharm El-Sheikh in terms of geoengineering specifically. What would you like to see happen or not happen?
For me, an immediate success coming out from COP27 by the end of the 19th, I hope. I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that the parties will not accept the recommendations coming from the supervisory body on Article 6.4 mechanisms, that none of this will advance, none of the options that are being put forward will advance. There has to be far more thorough discussions on this, and this should not be left in the hands of a handful of experts who form the supervisory body. And the mandate of the supervisory body is to recommend, yes, and the subsidiary body, SUBSTA, in particular, and the CMA in general, should not be giving further mandate to the supervisory body in terms of looking into engineering-based activities for removals, geoengineering, carbon dioxide removals in particular. In the broader sense, like for COP27 as a whole, like most civil society organizations who are investing time and resources in going to Sharm El-Sheikh, we're hoping that the COP will actually be able to address the issue of loss and damage, which is front and center of the discussions as we go into a climate hell, a climate emergency, which we cannot, of course, turn our backs to what we have seen in the past weeks and months in Nigeria, in Pakistan, as well as the ongoing long drought in Europe, and without discussing loss and damage. And I think if push comes to shove, like loss and damage needs to be far more outright in demanding for a reparation from developed countries, industrialized countries, for the havoc that they've created on the climate, which is impacting those who have the least contribution to this climate emergency.
Okay, it seems like there's everything to play for in the next couple of weeks in Egypt. And I know there were many concerns that not many people would be able to get to Sharm El-Sheikh because it's such a small fenced off resort. Do you know how many people from civil society are there, and what the capacity to actually voice civil society concerns is likely to be like over the next couple of weeks?
I have no idea about the numbers, but I'm sure it will be thousands still, despite the limitations in terms of cost and accessibility of Sharm. From the Philippine CSOs, in a little group that we have created recently, we already have about 100, and that's just the Philippines. So I think in terms of the capacity to articulate our demands, our narrative of what the problem of the problem before us, the crisis before us, and what we should do, I think the capacity is oozing. The main issue is the space, or whether they will be heard. Because that's always the question about COPs. Like, are they being heard? Are we being heard? Those who are speaking outside. Because like, as you know, like those of us who even bothered to engage in the inside, it's even very limited. Like, you sit there as an observer up to the informal consultations, you're kept out from the contact groups and further discussions, and a lot more are actually excluded. Those who cannot even enter because of the badge issue, and even worse in Sharm El-Sheikh, where the area for protests and demonstrations have actually been demarcated in a fenced off area. So I think more and more civil society will have to reach out to the media, the international media, especially in articulating their demands and also presenting their narratives away from the inside baseball that is being played in the COP itself. I think we should also not forget that demonstrations and all forms of actions in home countries in different parts of the world are also equally important, because those are the ones that are easily accessible to local media and also to the local population, because that translates the hard to understand negotiations language of diplomats in the COP into more real and gut issues that matter to people on the ground.
Okay, thank you, Neth, for that outlining of what the problems are on the table in Egypt this week and next week. And I hope you have a good flight there, and that you might be available to chat with us for some updates maybe over the course of the next 2 weeks.